All right, guys, we're doing this unedited. I did tell you guys, I did one of those, like, what do they call them? Kind of like like an Instagram story, but on YouTube, letting you guys know that this update was going to be a little bit delayed. But it's actually Saturday, so I was like, you know what? I think I can put it up now. I needed to reshoot this because I had already shot this one and I was kind of confused because there were some things going on and I was like, it was inaccurate. I put things on there that were not true or were just, I didn't know what was going on. And at this point, I know more or less what has happened. So I needed to reshoot this. And I want to give you guys as accurate information as possible because I don't want you to have certain expectations of this treatment. I just don't want you guys to think that this treatment is doing or not doing something. So most of my symptoms seem to be a continuation of the October situation. If you haven't watched that one, go ahead and watch it. I had bad diarrhea at the beginning of October that led to like a flare on top of a flare and intestinal spasms and all of that. And all of that has kind of continued into November. I think it may have been a die-off reaction. I think it possibly may have been some bacterial die-off. But again, that's just me guessing. And, without any help from my doctors, there's really no way of knowing whether that is true or not. I've had lots of abtension tightness, mid to upper abdominal pain after eating about an hour after. So I know that there's something going on, or that there was something going on probably with the small intestine. If you eat and you feel discomfort pretty quickly after you eat, it's typically the stomach. But when it waits or when it delays until after like maybe 30, 40 minutes to an hour, that's typically like small intestine and then probably large intestine, I guess, once the food starts moving through. So I've been having, pain, discomfort, some nausea, some loss of appetite, and some dyspepsia. I have been still having some of the burping and that kind of thing. And that weird mouth taste sensation. I get this weird, I don't know what it is. So it feels almost like fumes coming up from my stomach, and it's kind of like prickly and I don't know, spicy. I don't know how to describe it, to be honest. So I've been getting that. I think it's related to the histamine thing. I don't know. Stool is still soft. It's not diarrhea, but it's still soft. So I know that there's something bacterial that has changed in my body. I don't know if it's good or if it's bad, but anyways, that's just kind of what's been going on. Appetite has seemed to fluctuate though, and as the month has gone on, these symptoms have improved, or at least they've tapered off, so that I'm not having that very tense, knotted stomach sensation. Am I still having thoracic tightness? Yes. It's better than it was because last month and at the beginning of this month, it was really, really bad because I was having the thoracic tightness on top of the intestinal spasms, which just causes more tightness. So I do feel better than I had been feeling. I'm not at my baseline yet, which my baseline was where I was at prior to the exosomes on my IVIG. So I'm still not there yet. I'm hoping that I'm still moving in that direction, but it seems like as I get closer to my baseline, something happens and it just knocks me back down. For example, what happened in October with the diarrhea. I've also had some headaches, neck tension, and pain. That could have been from the IVIG. I did try the IVIG at the end of October. I do have an update on that. I don't know if I've uploaded it yet. It didn't go well, basically. And so I'm still having, a bad reaction to the IVIG. So that neck tension and pain, the headaches could have been because of the IVIG. But I did notice I was having kind of like neck stiffness, just kind of like this tension and discomfort. And that also seems to have tapered off as the month has gone on. I have had that itchy head which I think is related to histamines. So I have had episodes of just like itchiness and then some hair fallout. Intense itchiness, which, makes me want to actually scratch my head. And some mild to moderate hair fall. I was kind of worried that feeling that intensity of itchiness was going to mean that I was going to lose a ton of hair. I mean, I have lost some hair. You can tell just by the way that my hair is looking. It looks kind of like frizzy and weird. But it seems to be slowing down. I'm hoping that it's slowing down, but I am still having hair fall out. But luckily not as bad as I thought it was going to be, because that when I feel that head itch when it's intense, I know that my hair is just going to be falling out of my head. So this is what happened. So I like I said, I tried the IVIG at the end of October, and so I did a very small dose, and then I still had all the weird effects, the headache, tension, muscle rigidity, things like that at the end of that week. And again, I don't know if this is related to the IVIG. I don't think it is. I think it's just my body is just struggling with this treatment, this exosome treatment, and anything else that's added into it is just going to, I don't know. I don't know if what is causing it. But I had a horrible episode. I can't even call it an episode of gum inflammation. Bleeding, pain. I mean, it was painful to brush my teeth. It was horrible. I did have a gum infection earlier this year. That's in probably one of my first, maybe the first or second Exosomes update. That lasted about 2 weeks. I went to the dentist. He said, you need to floss. I've been flossing religiously since then, brushing my teeth twice a day, because I was not brushing my teeth twice a day. I would brush once a day. That was it. Never had any really big issues with it. Since I've done the exosomes, it has not been fun. And this episode was worse than the last one. So I don't think it's a gum infection. It's got to be some kind of reaction to the exosomes. Horrible gum inflammation. So it was from here. So my left upper side was the worst, which was also the worst area the first time I got the infection. So it's this top part seems to be the worst affected area. And the bottom as well. This time it came all the way up to the front tooth, and the same on the bottom. The bottom piece was not as irritated as the top, but it was still bad. And then I also had irritation in the very back over here, on this other side, where I don't even have teeth. So kind of where like the wisdom teeth would be, I guess. The top part, the gums where they connect to your cheek. So again, there's no teeth there. It felt almost like I had a cut, like a big cut at that very top piece. I would feel it with my tongue, and it felt like there was a huge cut there. And again, I didn't do anything to my mouth. I've been brushing, I've been flossing. This is just some kind of weird inflammatory response. I'm really curious. I am going to see another dentist in a couple of weeks that specializes in amalgam filling removal. And I'm just at my wit's end, because this time it was horrible. And I'm still bleeding, by the way. It's been over a month. That was probably the very beginning of November, because I did the IVIG the last week of October, and that week was like half October, then half November, and it was the end of that week, so the beginning of November. It is right now, December 3rd, I think, is today, and I actually started bleeding again last night from the front area. It's not as inflamed or irritated, but it seems almost like that inflammation is struggling to turn off. It seemed to have been healing after about 3 weeks, and now it kind of kicked up again. And last night I was bleeding from the very front part of my gum, like where the tooth, like the root of the tooth is. So I don't know what that is, but I am really getting tired of it. I mean, I was barely able to brush my teeth. It was so painful. It was really bad. It was worse than the first time, and I've been brushing and flossing and doing all of that. As far as period and PMS, still having the same insomnia. and cramps. Did not have night sweats in November. I do appear to be having PMS again. So I think, in October we got up to, no, in October I went to 28 days. November I went to 25 days. So I'm guessing I'm coming back down to 23 days this month, because I'm already feeling PMS, and it's like I feel like I just had my period, and I'm having insomnia. I'm having, I'm tired. Lots of gassiness. I mean, I just feel a hot mess. I'm hoping I don't have night sweats this month, but I'm already feeling kind of gross and sweaty, and we'll see how it goes this month. It has been, the whole PMS situation has been almost like a wild card every month. My sleep is still better overall. So it does appear that I am sleeping better than I was, especially between periods. I seem to be sleeping okay. The week that I did the IVIG, that did mess with my sleep. So again, the IVIG might be might be causing some issues, but I'm not doing IVIG anymore. Appetite seems to have gotten better as the spasms seem to have been calming down, but it does seem to be inconsistent. So some days I'll feel hungry, like, I'll actually feel hunger. And then a day like today, I don't really feel that hungry. So, I mean, I'm eating though. The other thing that I am noticing is that I'm eating and I'm not feeling the food hit my stomach the way that I used to. So I'm not feeling that like dyspepsia, gassiness, or having that heaviness or that kind of, I guess, bloated feeling in my stomach. So at least that's good. Even if I don't have an appetite, I can eat and it's not bothering me like when it actually hits my stomach. So, at least that's good. And I'm noticing I'm not having, as much of the stomach pain. I am still having kind of maybe some abdominal tension. But I don't know if it's exterior rib cage tightness or interior intestinal issues. But again, I seem to be eating more comfortably, or at least the food is going down more comfortably than it was before. I'm not sure if I'm really dealing with SIBO anymore, at least in the small intestine. It feels, I don't want to say that it's resolved because I haven't incorporated any high FODMAP foods into my diet yet, but it doesn't feel as bad as it used to feel. So I'm thinking that situation in October was possibly some die-off from the SIBO or from that overgrowth of bacteria. Obviously, that bacteria is still going to be there because that bacteria is supposed to be there. But I don't think it is like overgrowing the way that it used to. And I will elaborate a little bit more on that. Urination seems better. It doesn't seem like super frequent like it was before, but it does seem to fluctuate as well. But again, I'm not noticing that it is becoming a problem. So have been feeling, so this is where things started to get confusing. So this past week, I started feeling some discomfort probably last weekend. I started feeling, and oh, by the way, TMI, if you are bothered by, female issues, discussion of private parts or things like that, then you might want to go away right now because that's what I'm going to talk about. So I started feeling some discomfort in the nether regions, and I started thinking that my oxalate issues were coming back because that's what it felt like. Well, my oxalate issues have never gone away, but I started to think that my oxalate issues were getting worse. And I know that when I had SIBO, it helped my oxalate issues, which is kind of weird. But I guess it makes sense because certain bacteria helps, I think, to kind of combat the oxalates. I don't know if they like eat the oxalates or they crowd out other types of fungus or bacteria that make oxalate issues worse. But since I felt like the SIBO situation was improving a little bit, I started to think that my oxalate sensitivity was getting worse. Because a lot of what oxalate sensitivity causes, it can cause a lot of genital discomfort, almost like you're passing pieces of glass. you're actually passing oxalate crystals, and you pass that in your stool and in your urine. And sometimes they also get into the tissues of that area. So it can feel very uncomfortable, painful. You may even pass blood sometimes. And I started feeling discomfort, like that was happening. And I was getting a little bit upset because, like if it's not one thing, it's another. And that's what I had put in my last update. But I want to let you guys know that it was not that. I believe I had an infection. And if you guys have been following my updates, I used to get recurrent, well, I don't want to say I used to, but I was getting a lot of recurrent infections prior to doing the exosomes. One of those infections was bacterial vaginosis, BV, and I would get sometimes recurrent yeast infections, but typically it was BV or both. I also had the SIBO issue, and I also had an issue in my toe where it was just like spontaneously bleeding or seeping pus. Those three things seem to have stopped or gotten better since I did the exosomes. But I did have a yeast infection, and I believe that's what it was. What happened that really started to confuse me and just kind of turned into a mess was that once I realized that I was having some kind of infection, whenever I have that type of infection, I automatically assume that it's BV, because BV had just been happening over and over and over again. And I did have a lot of sugar over last weekend. So I was like, you know what? It's either going to be BV or both. I was having all sorts of symptoms, which is itching, burning, and those are symptoms of both types of infections. So I tried the clindamycin. Clindamycin is a cream. It's an antibacterial cream, and it made the situation worse. So then I put in miconazole, which is an antifungal. So I put everything in there, and it actually felt better. So I thought to myself, it's got to be a yeast infection or both. So I was like, whatever, I'll continue, because I didn't have any more antibiotics. So I just thought I'll keep doing the antifungal, and if it gets worse, then I'll go to urgent care. Let me tell you, I put in, the next day I continued the miconazole, and I have had this reaction before with a different type of antifungal cream. That's why I had switched to the miconazole 3-day, and I burned myself. I mean, it was burning so badly, and I was like, I don't know what's going on anymore. So I went to urgent care on Wednesday, and she said, I'll run a culture, but the results may not be accurate because you've been putting everything up there, so you may not have accurate results. And I was like, I know, whatever. I just needed to come in. And she did tell me that everything looked fine, because she does look in there. She does a culture. She actually told me that nothing looked irritated. She said everything looks okay from what I can see, which is kind of weird, because if I'm having irritation like that, it should be red or irritated, but she said things looked okay. So in conclusion, it was just a reaction that I had to the miconazole. So I guess I'm going to start reacting now to the miconazole. She did give me the oral diflucan, which is for yeast infections. I typically don't like taking it because it doesn't really seem to do anything, but I took it. I seem to be doing better as all of those creams came out of my system and just came out. So I definitely think that I was having some kind of issue with the cream. I do think there was a yeast infection there, but it was very confusing because of my reaction to the cream. I don't think I had BV. So the reason that I wanted to be very, very clear about this, and I had to wait a few days to see, and I'm still experiencing some irritation, but I think that may also be hormonal because, as I mentioned, I may be having PMS. But the reason that I want to be clear about these types of things, especially when it comes to bacteria and infections, is because the only good thing, or the only positive thing that seems to have come out of the exosomes treatment for me, is that it seems to be helping with bacteria or bacterial infection or bacterial overgrowth. The fact that I had, or that I believe I had, only a yeast infection and not BV tells me that my body may still be controlling bacteria more or less okay. I'm not saying that these issues have resolved, but I think it's important to note that my body still seems to be holding off bacteria specifically. I think that means something, but again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what it means. I'm going to be taking all of this to my doctor. I see her next week. And I'll probably give you guys an update on that as well. But I just think it's important because, as I said before, the only good thing that has come out of this treatment is that my body seems to be holding off bacteria or fighting it off. My toe also is not bleeding anymore. It hasn't been bleeding for several months. So that tells me that may have also been a bacterial infection. As far as fungus goes, I know I've had candida issues for a long time. That was one of the first big problems I had. And if I'm still getting yeast infections, I mean, obviously it was my fault because I did have a lot of sugar, and sugar can cause you to have a yeast infection, or it can contribute to that. It can also contribute to BV. So that to me is maybe a clue that I may still be having issues with candida or fungal infections or whatever, that kind of thing. I'm also keeping an eye on my toenails to see how they grow out, because if they do have a fungus and they start growing out better, maybe my body is fighting that off as well. I don't know. So I wanted to be very, very clear about that. And my last update was not, was kind of muddled because I didn't know exactly what was going on, but the irritation has gone down. So I do believe it was the cream causing a problem. And I do think that it was some kind of a yeast infection, which may indicate that I may still be having issues with fungus, candida, and those types of pathogens, and maybe even with viruses. I really wish that there was a way to check, how our body is fighting each different thing, because from my understanding, and I know this video is kind of going on a little bit long, from my understanding, or at least from my own experience, I think some of these are more difficult to fight off than others. Bacteria is probably the easiest one to fight off, and fungus seems to be relatively difficult for your body to fight off, and viruses, I think, are probably the worst ones to fight off. But I have no way of knowing because my doctor's not running blood work, and other doctors don't really. I mean, they're running blood work, but I don't know. It's not, I don't know if there is a way to check for stuff like that. But I don't know. I think that this is an important detail and an important clue as to how the exosomes are operating in my body and what they're doing. So I'm just gonna upload this without editing. It's been kind of a long video, but I just wanted to be very, very clear about this and not be inaccurate, because I don't want to say that the exosomes are doing something that they aren't doing, or that they're helping with something that they aren't actually helping with. And I do think it's important that I'm keeping track of, whether I'm having bacterial issues or yeast issues or viral issues, because I know that's actually a pretty big discussion, in the exosomes support group that I've been in. They say that, stem cells and exosomes can cause viral reactivation and all of this other kind of stuff. So I don't know. I think it's important to note what it's doing as far as pathogens are concerned. And that can also be helpful for those of you that have long COVID, because we know that COVID is a virus. And again, if exosomes can help you fight off viruses, then it may help with long COVID. But again, I don't know if it is actually working against viruses in my case. But anyways, just wanted to let you guys know I'm going to upload this. I will just have it go live without editing. And yeah, so thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next update.